Phil, this is Bernie Borges, and I am the host of the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. Happiness for me is just knowing that I have the love of my family, my wife of 36 years, my two adult children, their spouses, and our beautiful grandchildren. And then also my faith, knowing that I have the love of Jesus Christ, who is the Lord and Savior of my life.
Podcast is brought to you by Podman. At Podman, we help podcast hosts manage, market, and grow their podcasts. For more info, go to trypodman.com.
Welcome. You're tuned into the Happy AF Show, your weekly ticket to a world brimming with joy, energy, and positive vibes. Are you ready to dive into stories that uplift, strategies that empower, and tips that can transform your day from blah to brilliant? Every week, we bring you the most heartwarming, inspiring tales from people just like you who turned their can'ts into cans and their dreams into plans. Whether you're commuting, working out, or just lounging at home, the Happy AF Show is your go-to source for all things happy. Together, we'll explore the corners of happiness, from the simple pleasures of everyday life to the grand gestures that make life worth living. So buckle up, dear listeners, as we embark on this joyous journey. Get ready to laugh, learn, and maybe even shed a tear or two of joy. This is the Happy AF Show, hosted by Phil Gerbishak, ready to guide you through another incredible episode. Let's get Happy AF now. Let the show begin.
Holy cow. And if you recognize that voice, that's the voice of Bernie Borges, my friend here who's with me tonight. I'm so delighted that Bernie's here tonight. Bernie is a wonderful voiceover guy and a hell of a good friend. So Bernie, welcome to the show, man. It's great to see you.
It's great to be here, Phil. What an intro that is. Wow.
Yeah, well, we took your voice and we added it to video. So thank you for having such the wonderful voice, Bernie. That always makes me smile. So thanks for being there, buddy.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity, Phil.
Absolutely. So Midlife Fulfilled, this is quite a new, well, not really new, but kind of new to many that are like, what, isn't Bernie a marketing guy? And isn't he a, entrepreneur guy? So Bernie, how did you get started with this Midlife Fulfilled podcast?
Yeah. So as you know, Phil, because we've known each other for a while, I've been podcasting for about 10 years now, and I've been through 4 shows, and I was in between podcasts, personal podcasts. I currently host a podcast in my day job for my employer, but I was in between podcasts. And I decided that I wanted to do something around midlife. So I started doing some research on midlife, and I found well over 200 podcasts about midlife. And Phil, do you know that the vast majority of the podcasts that I found were hosted by women for women? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that was mostly what's out there. I didn't really find podcasts that were for anybody. And I didn't find podcasts around this concept of fulfillment. And of course, you're all about happiness. And you know what, Phil? There's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. Yes, there's a relationship, but there's also a distinction. So what is that distinction, you might ask? I'm so glad you asked me. Let me tell you. Happiness is a fleeting moment. You can be happy for years, but you can also be happy for just a minute. And then all of a sudden something else happens and you're no longer happy. Fulfillment, Phil, is soul deep. It is immutable, Phil. When you have fulfillment in some aspect of your life, it's immutable. I'll give you a simple example. If you completed a certificate in some program or a college degree or an advanced degree, you've got the fulfillment for that achievement. And that's immutable, Phil. Nothing can take that away. Now, that's a simple example, a very simple example. But I'll give you another example that distinguishes happiness from fulfillment. You can be fulfilled in your career. Let's say career's great. You're really fulfilled, but unhappy in your marriage or unhappy in your relationship, right? So those are two very different things that are going on in your life. Career's going great, totally fulfilled in this hypothetical example, but at home, relationships not going well, you're not happy. And I don't mean to paint a dark picture that I'm just trying to really, you know, show the contrast there. So let me pause there and go ahead and push back, push back. Tell what do you got?
Well, I think that's interesting that because, I think to your point, right? Happiness can be lifelong, but also it does go up and down. Fulfillment is, to your point, really immutable. And I think that's a great point. And you've got 5 pillars here that I
Yep.
think make it even more interesting to me. You've got health, fitness, career, relationships. And then the fifth one, which I think is mostly for people in midlife, right, is legacy. What am I going to leave behind? So, which one, Bernie, have you found in the interviews that you've done and the research that you've done? Which one is the easiest one to have? And then when we're done with that, let's flip that over and which is the hardest one?
None of them are easy, Phil. None of them are
Come
easy.
on, you're not going to give me any
No,
bunnies?
no. I'm sorry because think about it. Health, we all have health issues, some more than others. And some of those health issues are within our control and some are not. Fitness, I don't know about you, but I've been working out for 40 years and I'm still, not where I want to be, especially now that I'm in my mid 60s. I can't work out nearly as much as I used to in the past. Career, ups and downs there as well. I can look at my career and say, okay, I've done some really good things. And then I can also say, man, I've really missed the boat on a few things, right? And then relationships, for the most part, generally speaking, good. I can also think of a few where like, I kind of messed that one up, or I wish I could do that one over or whatever. The hardest one is legacy. Clear and away, far and away, legacy is the hardest one. And the reason, Phil, is because it is something we think about in midlife. And that is, you said, what do you want to leave behind? I think that's what you said. I frame it up a little bit different, just a little bit. And that is, what's the impact you want to have?
Mm.
That's how I define legacy fulfillment. What's the impact that you want to have on fill in the blank? So, for example, I have 3 fill in the blanks on my legacy fulfillment pillar. Okay. One is my immediate family, as I mentioned in the intro. So that would be my wife and my 2 adult children, their spouses, and our grandchildren. My parents are deceased and I have no siblings. So that's my immediate family, right? So I want to have an impact on them. I also want to have an impact on many faceless people that I may never encounter through my podcast, meaning I want my podcast content to have an impact on people. And fortunately, I do get some feedback that it is. And then third is I'm currently mentoring, and I've added the word reverse in front of it. I'm doing a reverse mentoring relationship with a fellow who's 28 years old. So he's, call it 35, 40 years younger than me. And, we talk every few weeks and I counsel him. And I've also learned that every once in a while, he's got something to say that, I pay attention to as well. So I want to have an impact on him as well. So those are the 3 things that I'm working on. And let me tell you, I just think, and the people that I talk to on my podcast, story after story, Phil, that legacy pillar is the biggest one that people are mostly focused on, and it's the hardest one.
Yeah, it sounds like the hardest one. So let's talk about that and let's talk about what first of all, what is midlife, Bernie? Is that like 30, 50, 100? What's midlife?
Okay. I love this question, Phil. So if you do a Google search on it, what you're going to read is that midlife is mostly between 40 and 60. That's what most of the definitions are. However, there really isn't a black and white, concrete, the definition of midlife. There's different variations of that. I actually define it this way. First of all, I say that we have 3 phases in life, and they're very unequal. The first phase is our youth, and it generally goes to about age 30. It's different for all of us, but generally speaking, youth goes to about age 30. Then we enter this long phase that we call midlife. For most of us, that is in our 30s for one simple reason, Phil, and that is we really begin adulting in our 30s in terms of responsibilities, right? Career, maybe mortgage, maybe marriage, maybe kids, maybe divorce, whatever the case may be. Adulting for a lot of us really kicks in our 30s. And all the stresses that go along with adulting really kick in our 30s. And then the third phase is end of life. And I don't mean end of life as the day you die. I mean, the period during which you begin to decline and eventually do pass away. I've experienced this with my own parents. I watched them both decline and eventually pass away. And it was a span of about roughly 3 years. And so, while that's different for everyone, of course, some people die suddenly and unexpectedly, and of course, tragically, or die of an illness. I had a good buddy who, died at a fairly young age to lung cancer, which was just horrible. But for those that just live until we die, there's that phase, that period where we just decline. So, all those decades in between youth and end of life are midlife seasons. I'm going to give you a little conundrum here. I have a friend who's 91 years old. He's healthy. He just retired 4 years ago. He retired when he was 87. He's healthy, cognitively, physically. Now he's retired. If he's not in an end of life season in terms of his health, would you consider him to be midlife at 91?
From what you defined, I would say, yeah, I think
I
so.
agree. I agree. I agree. In fact, I'm going to have him on my podcast because he listens to my podcast, and I told him I want to have him on. That's an example. That's my point. If he reaches a point where begins to have poor health that declines, and it's really not if, eventually he will, because we all do. It's inevitable, right? Then that will begin an end of life season. But up until then, we have these decades of midlife. And then I break down midlife into three very simple stages, Phil: early, mid, and late, right? So I'm in my mid 60s. So I'm kind of entering that late stage of midlife. Again, none of us knows. I don't know how long I have. I have no idea, right? But I'm still very much in that midlife season, even at age 66.
Wow. Wow. Well, first of all, you look great for being 66, Bernie. But
Thank
then
you.
again, I think, I know that you take care of your 5 pillars as well. I know you work out. I know you take care of the way you eat. I know you're at least moderately fulfilled in your career. Your relationships are strong. And I know from what you just said, you're totally building your legacy. So which one for you, Bernie, is the hardest one?
I'd say it's legacy. I think, what I'm trying to do to really get fulfillment in that legacy pillar is to, as I said, have an impact on my family. I'll get a little personal here. I feel like when my kids were younger, I didn't spend as much time with them as I would like to, or would have liked to spend with them. I didn't ignore them by any means, but looking back, I could have done more. And so now they're fully functioning, great adults, happily married, kids of their own, two grandsons on one side with my son and his wife, and then granddaughter with my daughter and her husband. And I want to have an impact on them any way that I possibly can. Likewise, been married 36 years, and I want to have an impact on my wife. Well, you might say, well, you've been married 36 years. That's impact enough. No, I mean, as you know, marriage is hard work. So I want to just continue to have an impact. And then, as I mentioned, I have this reverse mentoring relationship. And honestly, I want more of those. I mean, there's only so many I can handle, in terms of time, but it's a wonderful feeling to know that I am someone that is helping this young man, but I also know that in the relationship, I'm benefiting from it as well. And I don't know if benefiting is the right word, Phil. I'm enjoying it. I'm getting fulfillment from the relationship. I don't feel like it's all me giving, giving, giving. I feel like it's very interactive, and we exchange and engage with each other. He's a mature guy, and he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I want more of those. I'm also coaching a woman. I don't know her exact age. I think she's early 40s, and I've been coaching her for about 6 months now. And it's also a relationship that I enjoy. I've known her for like 12 years in a working capacity. So it's a very comfortable thing for us to kind of transition into a coaching relationship. And I know that I'm helping her, and I'm getting fulfillment from that as well. So, a big part of legacy is just, again, impact, having an impact on fill in the blank. And I just think as as long as I'm alive, there's going to be more fill in the blanks, Phil. No pun intended there, but you get the point.
Yeah, no, I do get the point, and I think that it's fascinating how now that you're 66, I would argue your impact is becoming deeper and deeper, maybe not wider and wider. And I think that's cool. I think that's a great way to go about it as you deepen that impact with your family and you deepen that impact, with the reverse mentor. I think that's fantastic, Bernie. So where are you, where are you enjoying other than legacy, right? Is there one that you find that like is health something you're enjoying, or is fitness? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm enjoying fitness because I've been fit and focused on and fitness and dedicated to staying fit really for 40 years. I took a picture recently, about a month ago, of me bare chested. So, wearing long slacks and bare chested. And I have muscle definition. I don't go around, shirtless to show it off, but I've got muscle definition, which not a lot of guys at age 66, have. So I'm motivated to keep it that way. However, it gets harder and harder. The older I
Yes.
get, the harder it is. Not the discipline. I'm up at 5 a.m., Phil. Every day, I say every day, Monday through Friday. I'm up at 5 a.m. and I generally work out until about 7:15 ish, give or take. Right. I mean, I shave first because I'm a shaver. I like to shave 7 days a week. And so, I'm usually I start my workout by 5:45 ish, give or take, to about 7:15, Monday through Friday. So the discipline is not a problem. What is getting harder is just the body. There's parts of the body that are just beginning to ache. I've got a problem with my left knee and blah blah blah. I'm not going to bore you and the listener with those details, but I enjoy it immensely, but it is getting harder just because of age is kicking in, and the body just starts to
Slow down.
revolt a little bit on you.
Yeah. That's fun. That's fun. Well, with 5 pillars, I mean, should we be aiming for 100%, Bernie, or what percentage do you think we need to actually feel like we're making a difference?
Yeah, another great question, Phil, that I love to respond to, because at the end of every episode on the Midlife Fulfilled podcast, I end it with the following statement. I say, if you're 80% fulfilled, you're doing great. And then I say, if you want to know how I know that, go listen to episode 100, because I explain it in episode 100. But here's the thing, it's simple math, Phil. There's 5 pillars. If you're fulfilled in 4 out of the 5 pillars, that's 80%. And if that's the case, you're doing great. Now, the reality is, most of us are not going to be 100% fulfilled in any one of those pillars, right? But let's not overthink it. Let's not overanalyze it. If you're generally fulfilled in 4 out of the 5 pillars, that's 80%, and you're doing great. And especially since I mean, unless you're 12 years old and don't have a care in the world, right? I mean, once we're in these midlife seasons, Phil, life is complex, right? So for us to even be thinking about being 100% fulfilled is just not realistic. That's why I say, if you're 80%, you're doing great.
Outstanding. Well, that's a good feeling that we don't have to be 100% and or be a failure. I think it's nice that it's not an on or perfect or imperfect there. So, Bernie, what's the surprising thing about midlife that you've learned? I know you've done a lot of research. You've got 150 episodes now, I
A little
believe.
more than 150.
Yep,
Yep.
a little
Yep.
more than 150, right? So, what's something surprising that you've learned in your research and your work that my listeners would be surprised by as well?
I think it's the fact that a lot of the people that I've talked to on the podcast, that have actually featured on the Midlife Fulfilled podcast, have had this thinking, this focus on their career as their source of fulfillment. And oftentimes I have these conversations where they begin to understand, they begin to think broader than that across the other pillars, and begin to realize that life is not just about career. Life is bigger than that. And I'll give you one example, Phil. There's a woman that was on the podcast who is a very, very accomplished in her career. She has her own business. She's very successful. And on the podcast, she hardly even mentioned her business, hardly mentioned it at all. What she talked about was the fact that she thought she would eventually be a mom. She thought she would eventually have a family, but she was running hard throughout her career, just nonstop, very successful, and then woke up in her 50s. Eventually, in her 50s, fell in love and got married, but not exactly the time in her life to start having babies. But here's where the story really gets great. Her sister has a little girl. So she is an aunt. This little girl is her niece. And what she said on the episode, and I can remember it, I can hear her voice, Phil. What she said was, she said, Bernie, being an aunt is enough. It's enough. I get so much joy and fulfillment from that that I don't even think about the fact that I'm not a mom because being an aunt is enough. And here's a woman who has had a very successful career and for many years thought that that was her source of fulfillment. And it was until she realized that she couldn't have fulfillment in this other area of her life, which she thought was, being a mom. But then she found it by being an aunt to her niece. And that's an example. There's other stories pretty similar to that, different circumstance, but similar to that, where, that some kind of a realization happened.
Mm. So that's a very powerful story and a very good reminder that enough is often enough. We don't always have to have it perfect. So that's a great example. Thank you, Bernie. So with that, what are some of the pitfalls though that we might hit as we're here in midlife that maybe we want to avoid that you've learned and seen that we can take so that as if people are getting into that space and are at the early midlife or the middle of midlife that they have that.
I think the biggest pitfall is just expectations that are too high, expectations
Mm,
to be fulfilled 100% in every area of life. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed experiencing, Phil, is the light bulb that goes on with folks when we look at life across these five pillars. Because prior to looking at life across these five pillars, people generally were just looking at their life in general and saying, well, I'm either fulfilled or I'm not fulfilled across just life in general. So once the light bulb goes on that there's five pillars and really ask yourself the fulfillment question across the five pillars, that takes some pressure off. So the biggest pitfall is this pressure that people tend to put on themselves, that they think that they have to be fulfilled in life in general when it's just not even the right question to ask. It's putting unrealistic, unnecessary pressure on yourself. Instead, put the pressure on yourself across the five pillars. Just ask yourself that question across the five pillars. And then just be honest with yourself on where you are in fulfillment across the five pillars. Then you know where to where to work on it. Whether it's your health or fitness or career, relationships, or legacy, once you examine each one of them, then you know where you really should be focused.
excellent. Well, before I ask one or two last questions here, I want to encourage folks. After you're done listening, go to midlifefulfilled.com. Bernie's got a midlife career checklist there for you. You can download, check it out. All of his podcasts are up. He's got a lot of great insights at midlifefulfilled.com. So with that, Bernie, if you were to leave behind one last piece of advice for our listeners, maybe it's something you already said, or maybe it's something that you want to make sure that you impart, what would that be?
Yeah, I think it is something that I've covered here, and that is so sorry to be redundant, and that is look at your life across these five pillars. That's really my key message, Phil. Look at your life across the five pillars. And as you do that, it's going to give you some clarity. So instead of, once again, as I said a moment ago, instead of just trying to look at your entire life as one broad brush, I'll use the age old analogy that's like trying to boil the ocean. Instead, look at it across the five pillars of health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. When you do that, you'll get some clarity by understanding where you lack fulfillment, where you have fulfillment, so you know where to pour your energy and emotion and your effort into. And again, it'll take some pressure off your shoulders.
Love that. Love that. Even though it's repetitive, Bernie, I think it's super important to remind folks to focus on the 5 pillars and not just an on or off, a yes or no. I think that's super powerful. I've got them on the screen here. 5 pillars are health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. Listen to Bernie and get to know that. Also, again, friends, go over to midlifefulfilled.com. Get to know Bernie Borges. He's got a ton of great podcasts, over 150 of them. He's got a great checklist for you. And he's someone that loves to share. His legacy is strong, and hopefully yours is too, friends. Remember, though, it's not, am I fulfilled or not? It's take each of the 5 pillars, take the time, and assess each of those. And remember, as Bernie says, if you're at 80%, you're doing great. Thanks, Bernie.